on to the next. I'm more than honored to introduce our next speaker for today, Emma Yu. Yes, Emma is a PhD researcher and tutor at the University of Edinburgh. She researches extreme weather and climate events, their causes as well as their consequences. She also investigates methods of conducting risk assessments for adaptation, decision making, and she's interested in the spaces of climate justice, particularly in relation to adaptation to extremeness. And she's also a co-chair of the Leaders Network at the 2050 Climate Group, a trustee as well as at SACAN, SCAN, and also the co-creator of the SDG Research Network. Um, Emma would actually be speaking on climate change, extreme events, and actions that we can take. So please join me as I welcome Emma Yu to the stage. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here and speaking to you today. So I'm going to talk a bit about my research, which is on climate change and extreme events, and hopefully give some research gaps as well, so some inspiration for what research we can do in this area. And also end with some actions we can take, so how we could get into this research space, but also working on climate actions and climate justice in general. So first, I thought I would give a bit of an overview of my career path. So path is in inverted commas here because it's not been a straight line. I've made some changes throughout it, which I think is quite normal, especially in the kind of climate sustainability path. So I've also added some hobbies that I started throughout my career because I think it's really important to not just focus on our career, but also our hobbies, our passion and interests, and bring those both into our lives. And I've put in the bubbles here some advice that I was given at different parts of my career. So maybe some of this speaks to you, resonates with you, some of it won't. So first of all, I studied physics and also a maths fan and done some internships in things like renewable energy, cybersecurity. So the advice I was given here was to try and sort of keep your options open. So explore different paths and avenues that were open to you, see what fits with you. Things won't, some will, and sort of spend that time exploring. So then I went on to a master's in management, so looking at technology, innovation, and worked for a few years in a project management consultancy. And it was around this time that I enjoyed what I was doing, but I didn't think it was really suited for me long term. So I had this advice about following your heart and the rest will follow. So really thinking about what it is that brings you joy. And so I really wanted to enter the environmental space. So joined as a data analyst in an environmental NGO, helping companies to look at their emissions and try and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and started learning French as well. So I then ended up doing another master's, which was in science, technology, energy, environment and management, which brought me in to do the PhD that I'm working on now. And a bit of advice that I got around this time was to think about what activities bring you energy. So I think we can all think about day-to-day what we work on, those activities that we really look forward to doing. And then after we've completed them, we get a bit of a buzz, some energy around us, versus the activities that you think, oh, I'm kind of dreading doing this. And then you feel kind of tired after. So I've sort of had this in the back of my mind and thinking about, for me personally, what brings me energy and joy and trying to sort of focus that on the decisions that I make in my career. So this brought me to work on things like climate communication projects and started SALSA as well. And the final piece of advice that's come up recently, it's quite a Scottish saying, what's for you'll no go by you. Which really in this context, thinking that what's for you won't pass you by. And I think in this space of climate work and climate justice work, there's a lot of opportunities to really make a difference and volunteer, which is great. But I think it's also around making sure that you keep that time for you as well. So trusting yourself to say no sometimes as well, and really sort of guarding your time, making sure that you're keeping yourself healthy and happy at the same time. So today I'm going to talk a bit about extreme weather events. So what are extreme events? So if we look at the definitions, it's something beyond what's usual or expected, something important or unusual. And in terms of weather and climate, we normally talk about severe or unseasonal weather. So weather at the extreme ends of the historical distribution, so things that we've rarely seen in history or maybe have never seen happen before. So we usually have a weather variable such as temperature or rainfall, and we have a value that's either above or below a particular threshold. And the definition of extreme weather and events can be complex. One of the reasons that they can be complex is extremes in one location can be considered maybe normal in another. So I'm from a place near Perth in Scotland where the average temperature is around 15 degrees Celsius. If we compare that with Perth in Australia, with an average temperature of 25 degrees Celsius, a heat wave in Scotland may not be considered a heat wave in Australia. So we can see that in different regions around the world, ecosystems and also our cities might be able to deal with different levels of rainfall, drought, heat, etc. So here are some examples of extreme events. So we have droughts, we can have forest fires, heat waves, floods, and marine heat waves as well. And we can start to think about some of the impacts that these events might have. So things like impact on food systems, water supplies. Here we can see the pylon in the forest fire there, so impacting energy systems, transport systems, and natural biodiversity as well. So who are impacted by extreme events? So we can all be impacted by extreme events, but not necessarily always in the same way. So how we are impacted or potentially impacted by extreme events will differ based on location around the world. So regions around the world that have done the least to contribute to greenhouse gas emissions are currently seeing a large impact and large circumstances of extreme events. And we might also see differences in how we're impacted by events along the lines of gender, class, age, ability, and ethnicity, for example. So if we look on the right-hand side, we can see this map, and the study was done by Carbon Brief. And it looked at how climate change affects the health of men and women differently. And overall, we see that women tend to be impacted more by extreme events around the world than men. And if we look on the left-hand side here, this shows the 100 climate papers, so the most cited climate research papers, and the continent and the gender of the authors. So we can see that a lot of the papers come from Europe and North America, and a lot of the authors tend to be male rather than female. So it's almost an inverse of where we're seeing the highest impact and the people researching it. So there's a real need to have a diversity of voices in climate research looking at extreme events. And to sum that up is this quote on the bottom left: "We may be in the same storm, but not the same boat." So what's climate change and how is it impacting our extreme events? So climate change is looking at large-scale and long-term shifts in weather patterns and average temperatures around the world. And this is caused by anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. So greenhouse gas emissions that are caused by humans through our cars or power stations, for example, and they act to trap the heat, a bit like a blanket, over the earth. And this was first published by Eunice Newton Foote in 1856. So we've known the science around this for quite a long time. And normally it's John Tyndall whose name is associated with this. So I think Eunice, her name needs to be mentioned much more in her contribution to climate science. And now we can see that CO2 levels in the atmosphere in 2019 were higher than at any other time in the last 2 million years. And you might have heard people talking about natural forces and the fact that volcanoes, changes in the sun might be able to increase the Earth's temperature. But we can see here the observed temperature, so this is the increase in temperature from all the thermometers, is increasing from this black line on the plot on the left-hand side here. And if we model natural forces only, we see that we don't really see this increase in temperature. It's only when we add on the human effects that we can then see this increase in temperature that we're experiencing globally. And this will lead us to have more heatwave events, flooding, for example, and damage to ecosystems. And here we have another diagram here called Show Your Stripes. So you can go on to Show Your Stripes, put in your local area and see how the temperatures are rising through time. And we can see globally that the last few years have been much warmer than the few hundred years before. And this will give us more extreme heat, more hot weather, and less cold weather around the globe. So take a breather there and move on to what we can do about it. So we can mitigate, we can reduce emissions that cause climate change. So things like looking at our transport system, so thinking about, can we walk, can we cycle as opposed to taking a car, and looking at renewable energy systems from wind, from solar, for example. And we can also adapt so we can manage the impacts of climate change. So this might be looking at flood defences, for example, or maybe looking at crops that are more drought resistant. And there's some actions that cover both mitigation and adaptation. So things like planting trees and also just learning and talking about mitigation and adaptation. So when it comes to the UN SDGs, we can see that climate change and extreme events is multifaceted and it is fundamentally unjust. So we've talked a little bit about extreme events and gender equality, so SDG 5, a bit about how these extreme events might impact access to clean energy, so SDG 7. So we really need all disciplines involved in this, looking at the interconnections between the SDGs and how these extreme events might impact upon them. So things from biology to chemistry to physics and social science as well. So we really should be working towards all the SDGs, making sure that the solutions we put in place for climate change and to try and reduce the negative impact of these extreme events are also fair and just. So what actions can we take? So there are many actions that we can take. These are just a few of the ones that I thought might be interesting to discuss with you today. So we can write, we can share our stories, we can write to politicians, employers, we can write articles as well, research articles that focus on extreme events and also their connection to the SDGs. We can share with others. We can talk about climate change to the people in our families, in our communities. We could see if there's a local group or organisation that we can join. We could design projects or maybe ideas or organisations that address climate change mitigation, adaptation and climate justice. And we could think about how we can use our work or our study. We can maybe speak to our teachers and our professors about climate change. Could we start up maybe a group, an eco club, and also maybe think about how our careers or our future careers could impact climate change. So thinking about what degrees we could study, how that relates to climate change and extreme events. And we can speak to people, reach out to people who are in those jobs that we might be interested in. And then thinking about our personal day-to-day, we can think about how we can learn more. If there's something that was particularly interesting for you today, we can learn more, think about it, and also keep ourselves safe. So making sure that we as individuals are healthy and happy is also really important too. So lastly, I wanted to share this plot with you, which was designed by a researcher called Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. And it's around how you can find your climate action. So you can use this to maybe find an area of research you're particularly interested in looking into, or maybe just a general action. And I ask you to think about what brings you joy. So what are your sources of satisfaction and delight day to day? What brings you energy? Thinking about what you're good at, so your skills, your resources, the networks that you're in, and what needs doing, so some of the climate and justice solutions that we talked about today. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds just to sort of reflect on this. I know sometimes we talk a lot about climate action, climate change, it's quite a heavy topic. So I'd like just to have a couple of seconds just to reflect, take some deep breaths. And also, if you find this diagram helpful, maybe you can jot some things down. So we're going to play some music just for 30 seconds. And we're also going to put a question up. So I'm going to ask if there's any actions that interested you from the presentation, any actions you would like to take, or maybe you're already taking. So I'll go quiet for 30 seconds and give you some time just to reflect on that and pop in the chat any thoughts that you have or any questions that you have. Lovely. So I'll come back in there. Hopefully that was helpful, just to have a little bit time just to take a few breaths and think about this diagram as well. It's not for everyone, but this has helped me at different stages of my career, and just thinking about different climate actions to really look at these bubbles and think about what we're doing. So I see some things in the chat. Is there time to answer questions now, or we can connect after the presentation?
Yeah, please feel free.
Excellent. So I see the first question here. How did you manage the shift in your career, and how would you advise someone who's considering a pivot? It's a great question. I think for me, it was just around speaking to people. So I spoke to a lot of people who were doing the career that I was interested in pivoting to, and just getting their advice on it, and really trying to understand what that job looked like day to day. So if there's someone who maybe you could go into the office or the lab just for a few hours and get a feel for what it is that they're doing. And I think most people are very happy to help. So if you'd like to chat offline, we can connect. And I think that for me would be the biggest advice. Just go in and trying to find as much as you can about where you would like to shift to, and then find the people that can support you to do that. I see some great climate action happening as well. It's really inspiring, all the things everyone's doing. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of great climate actions coming through in the chats, and it's really awesome. Yes, I mean, protecting the oceans. Yeah, definitely. I mean, as they absorb large amount of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. For popping your in the chats. I mean, thank you so much, Emma. I mean, for vital insights and key actions as well. That we can take in response, to these extreme events caused by the changing climate. And I mean, it's also very crucial and important, especially in the time that we are in. And of course, sharing with us the adaptation and mitigation strategies, help us to know which actions to take. And I'm super excited that a lot of folks in the chat are, pinpointing out actions that, they can take as well to mitigate this climate. Thank you once again, Emma, for such a wonderful presentation.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be contacted as well, and work together if anyone's got any further questions or thoughts.